Good morning. Good morning. And welcome to our service here at Central Unitarian Church. I'm John Freund, and I've been a member here for almost 2 decades, and I have been happy to find a spiritual home where theology is a personal thing that is celebrated together in covenant, in the spirit of plurality, and focusing on what we can do together. I've been involved in many aspects of this community, and I am happy to once again be cycling through as worship associate. If you are visiting us in person today, please be sure to say hello to one of our welcome hosts. Those of you here, raise your hand. There we go. There's Susan in the back. There you go. If you are visiting us online, please be sure to click the link provided in the chat and sign our guest book providing us with your name and contact information. CUC is an inclusive community of all ages which embraces diversity as it exists in identity, expression, and spiritual belief. We gather together here each Sunday in worship to find inspiration and hope and renewal amongst this group of like-hearted individuals. And so we invite you to stay with our community after service for coffee, conversation, and connection in this same space. As we prepare to begin our services this morning, we ask those in person to please put your electronic devices in it can wait mode, please. We have some announcements. The Kraft family, of course, is hosting coffee all this month. Thank you so much. I take it that this is actually a professional, a promotional marketing part because Clara Kraft is running this month's food drive to benefit the Center for Food Action. And I think Clara is going to come up and say a couple of words. Yes? Looks like she's going to get some help.
Hello, my name is Clara Kraft, and I am trying to help my community. I am an RE student, and I am hosting the CUC February Food Drive. I am a 13-year-old girl who lives in a warm house with food and clothes, but not every child and adult lives with as much comfort as I have. I try to think of what it might feel like to not have as much and to be worried about what tomorrow will bring. So we are going to support an organization that helps those children and adults in need. We are raising money and collecting food for the Center for Food Action. The mission of the Center for Food Action is to prevent hunger and homelessness and improve the lives of individuals and families living in poverty. I care very much about making this impact and helping others. I hope you do too. This is why I would like to continue having great results for the drive. Me and my family have been helping with this food drive for 4 years, and each year we try to beat the last goal. In 2024, we raised $1,320 and collected 11 bags. So far this month, we raised $953.25 and 5 bags of food. If you're able to help, please try and remember to donate. Just a reminder, next week will be our last week in this drive. An email was sent with details on how to contribute. You could Venmo, bring in cash, or check. I will be at coffee hour with my collection bin if you want to donate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire. The Women's Alliance Speaker Series continues next Sunday, February 23rd, with guest speaker Giovanna Lamarca. Right after service, the Alliance will be hosting their annual soup lunch. Yum. The cost is $10 for individuals and $20 for families. You can pay at the event. For questions, please email cucwomen, that's one word, women, at cucwestwood.org. The Peace Island Institute is once again hosting an iftar dinner for CUC members on March 11th. Please RSVP. The registration form is in our weekly newsletter, that being CUC's weekly newsletter, you should get by email. Or you can contact our office to register. Elizabeth Stewart and the Community on Shared Ministry would like to make an announcement. Elizabeth, come on up.
Good morning, everybody. Are you dry? No. Remember last year when we gathered in focus groups and shared answers to questions about membership in our church? Questions like, why are we coming to CUC? What drew you here? What holds you here? And why did you choose or not choose to become a member? So just to give you some history, because we do have quite a few new people now. The Board of Trustees created the Committee on Shared Ministry to evaluate the different ministries like worship, stewardship, membership, social justice, etc., that the congregation actually shares with the minister, and then to recommend changes to the Board of Trustees for strengthening or improving that ministry. So this committee, the shared ministry, decided to concentrate first on membership. And they created these focus groups to obtain feedback from the congregation. So from this information that they received from all you folks who were participated in the focus groups, they made the following recommendations, which we want to share with you. The first recommendation was, in order to define membership, we need to be clear about why we exist in the first place. What makes us relevant, and what needs do we fulfill that cannot be found elsewhere? The second recommendation was that since many of those questioned equated membership with commitment, it was recommended that the board edit the bylaws to de-emphasize pledging by making it an expectation rather than a requirement, and take steps to define membership as a commitment to CUC. Number 3, in collaboration with membership committee, create a culture of engagement with new members and visitors by guiding them towards participation and connection based on their interests. When new members sign the membership book, make sure that they understand that they will be asked to pledge and will be invited to become further engaged in the congregation. And number 4, we have already completed. Change the Sunday order of service to indicate that the sections we speak together are based on our vision statement, our mission statement, and the covenant as a means of emphasizing the covenantal relationship our members have with each other. And finally, number 5, the fifth recommendation was to develop activities now and areas of engagement before we move into our new building that can carry the excitement and energy with us as we move into our new worship space, and also keep us invigorated and engaged as we move along. In other words, we don't want to just have this year and a half is just like a waiting period where nothing happens. But we want to keep the impetus going with all our different committees and organizations. So the board will continue to explore these recommendations at our monthly meetings, and we want to thank the Committee on Shared Ministry, and that is Jeff Feinstein, Susan Springstead, Becky Bruce, Patricia Joseph, and Michael Patrick for their commitment to continue to evaluate and improve our ministries. So if you have any questions, I'm sure who is here? Susan is here, and Patricia's here, Allison. Okay, they will be very happy to answer any questions you have or any comments, suggestions, and so forth. So feel free to speak with them during the coffee hour. And also, in the February 7th, that was the monthly bulletin, the February bulletin, there's a very nice write-up, a little bit more detailed than what I have here, about the recommendations that the shared ministry has given to us. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, make sure you ask and make sure you make comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Elizabeth, sorry. Glance down, I see S's and E's and anyway. And now, let us more formally begin our gathering by doing something informal. Please turn to a person near you and offer them a warm welcome.
Good morning. In Eastern religions, the term terma means hidden treasure. Hear then these opening words by the Terma Collective. Living spirits of earth, mother and father of us all, you who hold us in your breath, you who bathe us in your waters, who feed us with your fruits, guardian of where we are going, of who we are becoming, cradle of our days and coffin of our nights, you who carry us folded in your arms, sailing silently among the stars, hear our prayers. And now I invite you, those who are gathered here in person, to stand in body or in spirit, and we'll sing our opening hymn, number 38, Morning Has Broken.
As we light our chalice this morning, please say with me our chalice lighting words based on CUC's vision statement. We light this chalice to remind us of our dreams, to nourish our heart, mind, and spirit, to work towards a better world for all, to embrace the whole of our human experience, to honor our past and the gifts of the present, to create a community where each of us may find healing, transformation, and hope. When I was in film school, that was called diegetic music. We are a nation that was built on celebrating and protecting individual liberty, and yet we are not alone. Our lives are built on shared commitments, giving and receiving together. Our congregation serves as a place where we intentionally practice this shared living, emphasizing interdependence in a culture that overemphasizes independence. One of the ways we practice interdependence is through our congregation's finances, which depend on the generous contributions of members and friends. And so we pause each week to recognize this particular form of sharing, each of us giving what we can to support the mission and the vision of Central Unitarian Church. And your financial contribution helps each and every one of us to grow and to serve and live lives centered on love, and most importantly, to share that love. In this spirit, our offering will now be gratefully received. Matt plays ragtime, it's fun to watch the congregation every once in a while. As we accept your gifts, let us recite our dedication words based on CUC's mission statement. We dedicate these gifts in service of our mission to welcome all into a home of spiritual diversity that challenges us to become our best selves, to minister to one another in love, and to serve a greater community.
We now pause to take a moment to share our joys and sorrows. We do this each week as a way of caring for one another. So let us now quiet ourselves in order to enter that holy space of listening and of breathing in a breath of life and breathing out a breath of peace. Scene. So we hold these cares, joys, and concerns in our hearts, as well as those that remain unspoken. And now, would you please join me in a moment of meditation? While sitting down where you are, be aware of your feet grounded on the floor. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath in, scanning your entire body up and down, from your toes to the top of your head, then back down again while breathing out. As you inhale and exhale, breathe deep into your chest so your belly fills with the air. When exhaling, control the air as it leaves your lungs. At this time, make breathing in and out your only responsibility. Listen to your breath as it goes in and out of your nose. Feel it as it fills your lungs. Control it as your lungs empty. Now do this for 1 minute. At the end of that portion of the silent meditation, I will continue with the text of today's spoken meditation, after which we will continue with another moment of silent meditation. You who want knowledge, seek the oneness within. There you will find the clear mirror already waiting. And that concludes this moment for meditation. I now invite those who are gathered here in person to rise in body or spirit as we sing together hymn number 374. Since what we choose is
Today's reading comes from Book 2 of De Natura Deorum, on the nature of the gods, written by Cicero, the ancient Roman philosopher and statesman. The best and also purest, holiest, and most pious way of worshiping the gods is to venerate them with purity, sincerity, and innocence, both of thought and of speech. For religion has been distinguished from superstition not only by philosophers, but by our ancestors. Persons who spent whole days in prayer and sacrifice to ensure that their children should outlive them were termed superstitious, from superstis, meaning a survivor. And the word later acquired a wider application. Those, on the other hand, who carefully reviewed and, so to speak, retraced all the lore of ritual were called religious, from religere, meaning to retrace or reread. Hence, superstitious and religious came to be terms of censure and approval, respectively. I think that I have said enough to prove the existence of the gods and their nature.
Superstitions are so common that sometimes we don't even really notice them. How many times have you crossed your fingers or saw someone knocking on wood in order to prevent bad luck? How many times have you heard that it's bad luck to break a mirror because you could be doomed for 7 years? What about the bad luck that supposedly comes about when you walk underneath a ladder or open an umbrella indoors or see a black cat cross your path? Perhaps you've heard about how throwing some salt over your shoulder can ward off bad luck, or that Friday the 13th of any month is a bad sign. Maybe you've walked into a room and noticed a horseshoe hanging above the door for good luck, or an amulet that wards against the evil eye on someone's necklace or bracelet. Maybe you've tossed a coin into a fountain hoping for good luck, or worn a special shirt or socks in the hope that your sports team will win. These are just some common examples of superstitions, none of which are particularly harmful, but each of which represents a way that human beings try to engage in behaviors with the goal of trying to influence a desired outcome. The practice of superstition has a long history, and this morning's reading by Cicero, who lived in the 1st century before the Common Era, shows how even in the ancient world, a world which we assume to be less enlightened than our own, that people could tell the difference between a practice or belief that's superstitious versus one which is religious, as well as that superstitious practices had a negative connotation even then. For Cicero, it's important to emphasize that genuine worship of the gods should be characterized by attitudes like purity, sincerity, and moral integrity, rather than excessive rituals or fear-driven practices. He goes on to explain the origin of the word superstitious in Latin, suggesting that it originally referred to those who engaged in obsessive prayer and sacrifice for the purpose of ensuring their own survival or that of their descendants. And the word for superstition in Latin comes from the word meaning survivor. And only later in time did the term take on the broader meaning, referring to excessive, irrational, or fearful devotion. In contrast, the word religion referred to a careful, thoughtful, and measured approach to religious observance. Cicero notes that while philosophy can justify religious beliefs, it cannot be used to justify superstitious practices. Ultimately, he argues that proper religious practice involves reason and virtue, whereas superstition is excessive and misguided. This serves as part of his broader argument for the existence and nature of the gods, which he believes should be approached with reason rather than fear. Cicero was not the only ancient thinker to be critical of superstitious practices. The ancient poet and philosopher Lucretius also spoke out against superstition and the ways that it leads to human misery. In his book On the Nature of Things, saying, quote, "Such fear was the first thing in the world to create gods and to bring in offerings to their shrines. O miserable minds of men, O blind hearts, in what darkness of life and in how great dangers you pass this little span of life. Why do you not see that nature demands nothing but that pain be kept away, and that the body enjoys a pleasurable feeling free from care and fear?" End quote. For Lucretius, being fearful of invisible forces arises from irrational fear and does more harm than good. Lucretius was a follower and admirer of the ancient Greek philosopher Epicurus, who himself had written in a letter that, quote, "It is vain to ask the gods for what one is capable of supplying for oneself," end quote. In other words, according to both Lucretius and Epicurus, it is best to replace superstition and vain intercessions with rational thought and ethical living, which are far more effective at achieving one's goals than superstitions are. Similarly, the ancient Greek philosopher and priest Plutarch wrote an entire book about superstition called On Superstition, in which he shared his belief that superstition leads to irrational behavior and that superstition is actually worse than atheism because, quote, "Atheism leaves a man to reason, but superstition places him in perpetual terror. The atheist does not fear gods that do not exist, while the superstitious man fears gods as if they were cruel and malevolent," end quote. In addition, the ancient Roman philosopher and statesman Seneca also had a negative view of superstition, especially compared to religion, because of the way that superstition is rooted in fear instead of virtue. He wrote in his letters to Lucilius, quote, "Religion honors the gods, while superstition wrongs them. The superstitious person thinks only of how he can avoid their anger, rather than how he can live virtuously," end quote. For Seneca, as for the other philosophers I've quoted, the purpose of religion is not to bargain with the gods or to avoid malevolent and invisible forces, but rather how to learn to live ethically and justly. Interestingly, while the ancient philosophers were against superstition because it was seen as a vain attempt at self-preservation that induced fear and distracted one from living an ethical life, it's worth noting that many of the ancient biblical writers were also against superstition, though for different reasons. For the biblical writers, superstition was simply misguided and misdirected religious activity, which is to say that superstitious practices were seen as a sign of a lack of trust in the Almighty. For example, the author of the book of Deuteronomy wrote, quote, "Don't let your people practice divination or look for omens or use spells or charms, and don't let them consult the spirits of the dead. Yahweh hates people who do these disgusting things," end quote. Very clear. And the first epistle to Timothy warns its readers, quote, "Have nothing to do with profane and foolish tales. Rather, train yourself in godliness," end quote. Superstitions in these examples are seen as being either completely false or else as coming from a malevolent source that is best to be avoided. While superstitions have a long history of being looked down on and condemned, for one reason or another, why do members of our species persist in practicing them? One person who's thought about that is Dr. Dimitri Xygalatas, who's a professor of anthropology at the University of Connecticut, where he teaches classes on religion, ritual, cultural practices, and cognitive science. In an article about superstition, he shared an example from his own childhood, which sparked fascination into why people believe the things that they do. He shared that while growing up in Greece, he spent summers at his grandparents' home in a small coastal village in the northern region of Halkidiki. The warm, sunny days were mostly filled with playing in the streets alongside his cousins. However, on occasion, summer storms would roll in, bringing torrential rainstorms. These storms could be seen approaching from a distance, with dark clouds gathering on the horizons and flashes of lightning illuminating the dark sky. When a storm arrived, he would hurry home, curious to watch his grandparents' preparations. His grandmother would drape a dark cloth over the large mirror in the living room and cover the television with a blanket. Meanwhile, his grandfather would climb a ladder to unscrew the light bulb above the patio door. Once everything was set, they turned off all the lights in the house and waited for the storm to pass. The reasoning behind these actions remained a mystery to him, until one day when he asked about it, and his grandparents explained that light was believed to attract lightning, or at least that's what people supposed at the time, so they preferred to take precautions just to be safe, just in case. Thanks to his anthropological research, Dr. Zigalatis discovered that superstitions often stem from intuitive beliefs about how the world operates. Early anthropologists explained these beliefs using concepts like similarity and contagion. The principle of similarity suggests that things with a physical resemblance might also share a deeper connection, much like family members who not only look alike, but may also have similar traits. While this isn't always true, the idea feels instinctive, leading people to apply it more broadly than they should. As an example of similarity, consider mirrors, related to the superstition that Dr. Zigalatis' grandparents practiced. The light which mirrors reflect has nothing to do with the lightning from a storm, yet because both produce light, people in many cultures have seen a connection and treated that observation as wisdom. Similarly, since a mirror reflects our image so closely, many believe that breaking one brings bad luck, as if harming the reflection could somehow harm the person. As another example of the theory of similarity, I came across an ad in a magazine for a Valentine's Day event at a brewery in Brooklyn, where for $35 you could enjoy sparkling wine and charcuterie while creating a handmade voodoo doll of an evil ex-boyfriend or girlfriend. The superstitious idea that torturing a doll that resembles an ex might help someone feel better about a bad relationship, but likely will not actually cause harm to the intended person despite the similarity between the object and the person. The other origin of superstitions comes from the principle of contagion, which comes from the belief that objects and beings can transfer their inner qualities through physical contact. Just as fire spreads its heat to anything it touches, and illnesses pass from person to person, people across cultures often assume that other, less tangible essences can also be transmitted in this way, whether they realize it or not. For example, this idea explains why gamblers might reach out to touch someone on a lucky streak, hoping to absorb their good fortune. It's also why in 2014, the Italian city of Verona had to replace a statue of Juliet, an image of the tragic lover from Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, after countless visitors wore it down by touching it in the hopes of finding romance. It's also why real estate brokers in some states need to disclose to new buyers if a home has been the site of a homicide, suicide, or crime, because buyers are afraid that something like that could somehow rub off on them. It's also why people are willing to pay a lot of money for an article of clothing or other artifact that was owned by a celebrity, because somehow the essence of that person is assumed to have rubbed off on that object. Beyond the theories of similarity and contagion, superstitions also reveal a deeper aspect of how we think, which is that we humans tend to search for patterns in order to make sense of our confusing world. When two events happen together, we often assume that they're connected, like seeing dark clouds and then expecting rain. But we also know that our world is very often too complex for simple cause and effect. Most of the time, correlation does not mean causation, even though it may feel that way. For example, consider the superstition of having a lucky shirt. A person wears it to the game, your team wins, and suddenly it's your lucky charm. In truth, many factors have changed, but you focus on the shirt, convinced that that's the source of your success. People are invested in their lucky charms working, so when they don't work well, they tend to forget about them or blame something else. But if their team loses, they might blame the referee, for example. But if the team wins, they're more likely to notice the lucky shirt and proudly declare that that was the reason for their success, spreading the belief further. As social creatures, much of what we know comes from shared wisdom. If others believe in a certain action, we're likely to trust it too. And this better safe than sorry mindset helps explain why superstitions are so common. They also feel good. Research shows that rituals rise during uncertain times, offering a comforting sense of control, even if it's just an illusion. I can't say if the times that we are living in right now are objectively any more uncertain than any previous time in our lifetimes, but a lot of people say that they feel as though we are living in uncertain times. Noting that sense of acute uncertainty as well as the persistence of superstition in our modern world, the British journalist Emma Beddington wrote a few months ago about the various forms of magical thinking and superstition that she'd been noticing. For example, she cited a TV interview with Tucker Carlson in which he claimed to have been physically attacked by demons in his bedroom while sleeping. She also mentioned a $200 amulet with supposedly magical powers that the English comedian Russell Brand has been wearing and promoting, which allegedly can repel evil energies and signals. She also cited an article in Teen Vogue, which discussed the magical activities of a group called the Resistance Witches, who are using magical rituals with the intention of supercharging their vote with magic. This was before November. In one ritual, to prevent the candidate you don't like from winning, you print a photo of that candidate, you write his or her name and birthday on it, then you fold it, tie it up, then mentally infuse the object with your magical intentions, stating aloud why that candidate should not win, then put it in the back of your closet until after the election. Reflecting on her observations of these practices, Beddington writes that, quote, "We aren't living in very rational times, are we? Conspiracy theories, each more improbable and impervious to logic than the last, flourish, and we're supposed to put our faith and funds in magic beans called crypto. At the most basic, urgent level, we know rationally, because science tells us daily, hoarse and despairing, that we can't keep living as we are, that our world is collapsing. But we choose irrationally to do exactly that. Traditionally, folklore was rooted in a world where disease, violence, and terrifying natural phenomena felt beyond human control. It offered ritualized responses to incomprehension and impotence. Now we understand how a pandemic spreads, the forces that fuel state and individual violence, and how anthropogenic climate breakdown drives extreme weather, catastrophic floods, and wildfires. I prefer to believe that the answers to these concerns will be human, rational, and scientific too. But when that feels hopeless, why on earth wouldn't you fall back on magic and manifesting, on superstition and delulu, on howling at the moon, end quote. As Unitarian Universalists, we are a faith tradition that is quite skeptical of any kind of superstition or other practice which doesn't satisfy the test of reason, or which isn't actually helpful to those who practice it. But we live in a culture where superstitions are not uncommon, and we also acknowledge that all of us sometimes engage in various forms of magical thinking. Many people, including those of us here, sometimes have unrealistic beliefs or expectations that are not based on logic or evidence, but are instead based on the idea that our thoughts or feelings in and of themselves can somehow magically influence unrelated outcomes. When we challenge our own magical thoughts or our own superstitions, we might feel less fear or worry, something the ancient philosophers taught us too. Letting go of magical thinking and superstitions can also help us be more psychologically resilient by embracing reality just as it is, not as something that we can manipulate to fulfill our own will. Doing this can help us recover from setbacks more effectively by understanding that our actions and responses shape outcomes more than arbitrary beliefs. So the next time you catch yourself knocking on wood or crossing your fingers, take a moment to reflect. Am I relying on luck or on my own ability to shape my future? The answer, as the philosophers and scientists remind us, is in our hands.
As we extinguish our chalice today, please join me in saying our words based on our covenant. We extinguish this chalice flame, but not our promise to each other, to act with grace, to hold each other in love, to serve this community and our world. This promise of the heart serves as a reminder of how we live together. May it bring joy to our collective lives. Please stand in body and spirit and sing together our closing hymn, number 286, A Core of Silence.
Our closing words are by the late UU minister, John W. Brigham. Go your ways, knowing not the answers to all things, yet seeking always the answer to one more thing than you know.
fact that